Yes, we've escaped the Jedi Purge. I figure we'll just lay low on Yavin 4 for a while and ride this thing out. No, it's cool. This is the last movie. It's chronologically, there's 3 after this, but, I mean, I've had a vision in the Force. The Empire falls, the Rebels win, we're cool. Everything's gonna be fine. Worse? What do you mean worse? Worse than the Empire? What could possibly be worse than the Oh, no. No, it can't be. Oh, shit. When the announcement was made in 2012 that Disney had acquired Lucasfilm and would be producing new Star Wars films, the world collectively went apeshit. I didn't. Frankly, it seemed like a bad idea. As someone who can honestly state that Star Wars had a huge influence on my interest in filmmaking, editing, effects, etc., it nevertheless felt as though there wasn't anything really of consequence left to tell past the end of Return of the Jedi.
The circle is now complete.
Sure, that hasn't stopped what seems to be thousands of authors from trying to do just that. But, aside from the very first Star Wars spin-off novel, I've never read any of these continuations. As far as I was concerned, Star Wars was what George Lucas wrote, and anything else was basically just sanctioned fan fiction, an opinion I have regarding pretty much any other piece of fiction attaching itself to the work of another author. And as such, I hadn't even really intended to see the film. But when I eventually did, I was rather shocked, because while I was fully prepared to be apathetic about its existence, I was at least expecting the film to be competent. Instead, it was lazy, derivative, inconsistent both internally and in context of the previous films, and visually aped the original trilogy while simultaneously displaying a complete lack of understanding as to what Star Wars was about.
It wasn't all bad, was it?
It also felt, probably unintentionally, like a big fuck you to the original cast of characters, who we'd last seen happy and triumphant. Now we're given to understand that Han and Leia's relationship failed, the Empire wasn't really defeated, and Luke repeated the mistake of his own mentor, even though we'd been told that
the Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
Which gave the impression that cases like Anakin's were hardly commonplace events. So if you felt uplifted by the end of the original trilogy, well, I guess you have to kiss that goodbye. But most of all, I did not expect for the film to be a weaker rehash of A New Hope, with little bits of Empire and Jedi stirred in here and there. From huge plot arcs, such as a droid sent to a desert planet carrying secret plans that will save everyone, to individual shots essentially recreated right down to the camera moves, The Force Awakens displays an unbelievable lack of creativity.
I want that map.
Not excuses.
There's too much.
With his father in him.
There's been an awakening. Have you felt it?
I have felt it.
There's still good in him. I know it.
Their weapon will fire.
5 minutes. And yet, it's obvious that doing a rehash was exactly what they intended to do. The first planet we visit is called Jakku, though I don't know why, as it's obviously just standing in for Tatooine. If it had actually been Tatooine, it would have been slightly more excusable. But to come up with a different locale and yet make it look identical to an old one makes it obvious that they meant to do nothing more than just tweak people's nostalgia. Remember that robot rolling over sand dunes? Well, you get to see that again. And you get to see it liberated from scavengers again. And you get to see it pursued by stormtroopers again. Apparently Star Wars isn't a type of story or a certain style, but particular, very specific events. There's a difference between walking a similar path and putting your feet squarely in pre-existing footsteps. It's almost like a practical joke played on people who like Star Wars. Give them a collection of scenes they've already seen before, all done worse than originally.
They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different.
The original trench run scene to destroy the Death Star still stands as one of the best sequences I've ever witnessed in any film. Episode 7's pointless revisiting of X-Wings flying down another trench to destroy what is in everything but name another Death Star lacks any thrills. is it features neither of the main protagonists, is thematically meaningless, and we can already guess correctly that it will result in the same outcome. Yet at the same time, it's astounding that despite taking great pains to recreate an old hit, and despite employing screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan, who'd penned both Empire and Jedi, the film displays a total unfamiliarity with the world of Star Wars and how it functions. Is it true that
A Jedi must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind.
Or is it true that if you've got the potential, you can master the Jedi mind trick, even if you've never even heard of it, just by trying a few times? It took Luke until Return of the Jedi to wield this power.
You will take me to Jabba now.
It was a sign of his growth and maturing skills. Now we're told that such a power can be essentially had by just badgering someone long enough.
That's not how the Force works.
A line that really should have been delivered to and not by the screenwriter. But what exactly can the Force enable a Jedi to do? Can it let you read minds?
It's in a droid.
That sure as hell would have made Vader's job a lot easier, and yet, despite being supposedly the most powerful Jedi ever known, and despite his close rapport with Luke, he was at most able to discern that Luke was thinking of his sister, not even who the sister was. Does it let you read the history of an object just by touching it? Well, Luke seemed to be able to handle his father's lightsaber without sensing anything. And what of those fabled weapons, described as
not as clumsy or random as a blaster?
Is the use of one a skill someone could just pick up, or does it take years of training? The mission statement of Force Awakens seemed to have been, make everything easier. It's as if all that growth and training was just too tedious and not draped with enough wish fulfillment. Who wants superhuman skills if they take work? This has led to much discussion over whether new protagonist Rey constitutes a Mary Sue character. This is a term which predates Star Wars itself and arose out of critiques of early 70s Star Trek fanfiction, wherein authors would frequently write themselves into the Trek universe as a basically perfect character who outperformed all the regulars at their jobs, despite far less experience, and often died heroically saving the ship. From this description, it's apparent that this isn't an entirely on-point criticism. I don't think Rey is how either Lawrence Kasdan or J.J. Abrams see themselves, and she didn't die heroically or otherwise, yet. Self-insertion isn't a requirement for the Mary Sue type, but it's very often the case. The charge of near perfection, however, is one which has some merit. The name Mary Sue, coined from a very short Trek fan story lampooning the overused trope, is female only because most of the Trek fanfic of the day was written by women. The next generation character of Wesley Crusher was derided, justifiably, for the same reason. There's nothing wrong with beginning the journey towards the mantle of hero with some skills, as most of us are good at something. However, there's no logical reason why Rey should be able to fly the Millennium Falcon almost as well as Lando Calrissian after futzing around with it for a few minutes. Luke was established as having piloting skills, but those didn't translate to piloting the much larger ship.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy.
She certainly shouldn't be able to tell Han Solo things about his own ship that he doesn't know.
What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
The mentor-student relationship entails information going the other way. And here we see another problem. While obviously taking on the mentoring role here, as Obi-Wan did for Luke, Han teaches Rey nothing, either in terms of skills or in terms of personal growth. Now, Han as a mentor is an idea I actually like, as out of the original three, he seems to be the one least suited and least destined for such a role. But instead, the film thwarts his status as mentor for purposes of comedy, and ultimately just uses him as an exposition mechanism.
It's all true.
Rey goes on to master advanced Force techniques with nearly no effort, and outfights an opponent so strong with the Force you can stop lasers in midair, which even Vader couldn't do. And it's not as if only fans saw the problem with this.
When you were in the forest and the lightsaber jiggled in the snow, I said, okay, here I am. And it flies into the hands of Rey! She didn't even do any training.
Predictably, lazy media dismissed complaints, justifiable complaints, that a character getting everything just by wanting it was somehow anti-woman, when the sex of the character was never an issue. A male character written the same way would have been just as bad. Rather, it's an inconsistency with the rules laid down by previous Star Wars films. The original trilogy could have easily featured a female lead, as Lucas was torn over the choice well into development, ultimately resulting in the idea of the twins. Compare to Rey, whose only actual mistake in the whole film still ended up helping the heroes, something people hated when Jar Jar did it, with Luke's development. Minutes after being introduced, Luke is conned by a droid that can't even talk, which leads to him being nearly killed by sand people but for the timely arrival of Ben Kenobi. He then, by virtue of no other reason than simply being Luke Skywalker in a public place, nearly gets his ass handed to him in a bar fight, resulting in his needing to be saved by Obi-Wan again. He steps partially up to the challenge by conceiving of half a plan to save Leia, who must then supply the other half.
This is some rescue. When you came in here, didn't you have a plan for getting out?
He's the brains, sweetheart!
He finally acquits himself in the Battle of the Death Star by doing something he's admitted to having more or less already done.
Used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
Again, with the help of R2, Han, and all the other pilots who died making sure he could get to the target. And then he's back to screwing up as a monster clobbers him in the first few minutes of Empire, requiring Han to once more come to the rescue.
That's 2 you owe me, Junior.
He goes to train with Yoda, who finds him rather unimpressive.
I cannot teach him. The boy has no patience.
And proceeds to fail test after test his teacher gives him before falling for a ruse and abandoning his training. Not only does he lose his hand in an ill-fated confrontation with his father, whom he wasn't really ready to know was his father, he doesn't even help save Han. In fact, one could argue he makes things worse as his friends have to abandon their pursuit of Boba Fett to go back and save his ass. It's not until the final confrontation with Vader in Return of the Jedi that Luke truly achieves a victory by refusing to become the thing he hates.
I'll never turn to the dark side.
Luke always wants to do the right thing, but being a hero takes a lot of work. Why does Rey have it so easy? She never needs help, she never meets a challenge she can't overcome with minimal effort. I'm not saying it was a deliberate attempt to inject some girl power narrative into the film. Or maybe it was, but if so, it was done badly as inconsistency rears its head again. Captain Phasma is the first female villain to appear in a Star Wars film, but despite her rank, her feminist cred is a bit sullied by her willingness to divulge vital information on destroying her nation's greatest asset to save herself.
You're making a big mistake.
Do it.
It also raises another point regarding the villains. They're now more diverse, too. Star Wars always showed diversity amongst its heroes, who were pitted against the sterile monism of the villains. At the same time, it ejects scenes such as this blatant Nuremberg homage, begging the question of, are these new baddies more or less fascist than the old ones? Pick one, movie. Commit to something. Even your supposed pro-woman agenda comes across as very half-assed. Much, much worse in the spinelessness of Captain Phasma is the fact that Leia is completely wasted. We'd been told that
You have that power too. In time, you'll learn to use it as I have.
but there's no sign that she has. Her participation is limited to a sad conversation with her former love, and a rehash of absolutely no one's favorite Leia scene from the original trilogy, where she stands around in a room listening to a battle on the radio. How much more compelling would it have been to have had her fight Kylo Ren at the climax? She would have both training and personal investment, rather a lot of that actually, and should have been fulfilling the mentor role to the younger, less experienced characters. If we can't see the characters we loved happy, can we at least see them as symbols of strength? While we're on the subject, what's with this awkward scene where Finn starts to run to Rey's assistance only to be taken aback to find she doesn't need his help? It's a scene they felt the need to basically repeat in Rogue One, where the male hero is abashed to see his help isn't needed. Aside from hoping that no one's takeaway from this is that they're a sexist pig if they actually try to help a woman being attacked by multiple assailants in the street, I must point out that this obvious attempt to say, see, women can be strong and capable too, is, unless you're selling this film in Saudi Arabia, something we already know. In fact, we know it within the context of Star Wars films. Leia was a badass. She took shit from no one.
I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
Vader could never force her to give up the rebels. Jabba the Hutt tried to make her a trophy and spent his last agonized moments regretting that decision. And what's more, no one regarded this as odd. These surprise reactions give the impression that strong women are a rarity in the Star Wars universe. Is that really the message they want to be giving here? Of course, it might have been less due to an agenda and more due to bad writing, as it would hardly be the only example. Which brings us to Finn. I hate to harsh on this character too much, given that a stormtrooper who defects to the hero side is really the only new idea to be found in the film, but it's still a mess. We're told late in the film he's a sanitation worker.
Sanitation?
For what appears to be no other reason than an excuse for humor. Yet the film opens with him functioning as part of a death squad that exterminates a small village. Why would a sanitation worker ever be on such a mission to begin with? The death of a fellow stormtrooper seems to affect him in a way we haven't seen with these faceless villains before. But shortly thereafter, he's killing plenty of stormtroopers himself. So what are we to take from that? He describes a lifetime of indoctrination at the hands of the Empire 2.0, but easily rejects it after his first brush with combat, and seems like a pretty normal guy, not some mindless drone. Does defection from the First Order happen often? Of course, again, more slack-ass clickbait-minded media tried to dismiss fan objections to a black stormtrooper with cries of, "You're racist!" when in fact they were actually just expecting him to be Maori. Once the film explained that the stormtroopers were no longer clones, the objection pretty much disappeared. Now, Finn at least seems to have an actual character arc, albeit a muddled and confusing one, but he also seems handier with a lightsaber than he should, given what we know about these conflicts from previous films. If 10 years of Jedi training only enabled Anakin to survive about 1 minute against the Sith Lord, there's no excuse for these amateurs to be walking away from this fight with all their limbs still attached. Hell, that's not even how that lightsaber turns on. It's not there, it's in the middle. It's right here, see? Duh! Is this important? Is this really a make or break thing? No, it's not. And if it was a better film, I could excuse such small continuity gaffes as that. But it's not, so I can't. The less said about Poe Dameron, the more accurately it will reflect his involvement with the story, as he's not in it very much. And it's said that he was originally meant to die when he crashes in Jakku, since it totally looks like he would have. Oscar Isaac is a fantastic actor, but what can anyone do with this material?
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
The old man gave it to you.
It's just very hard to understand you with all the...
This is Star Wars, not Spaceballs.
How do I know you're not making faces at me under that thing?
I know there's a connection, but please, try to keep them straight.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
One could make an entire video on Kylo Ren, Darth Emo, whose entire motivation seems to be based off of parental disillusionment, about which we know nothing.
Han Solo. You feel like he's the father you never had. He would have disappointed you.
Is he justified in his anger at his father, as Anakin was with Obi-Wan and the Jedi for basically making him abandon the only family he had, with tragic consequences? While we knew very little of Vader's conflict with Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, Obi-Wan was also a supporting character whose story was not the focus of the plot. In contrast, Han Solo was a huge part of the original 3 films, and a long-standing fan favorite. And yet, his death feels less tragic and more like simply ticking a box on a contract.
Who saw that come? Who saw where that came from?
All throughout, the film serves up example after example of weaker re-renderings of old hits. Both this film and New Hope featured the evil superweapon destroying a planet or two. In New Hope, we get context for the otherwise anonymous planet. In Force Awakens, it's not even clear what planets are blown up. It looks like Coruscant. Is it? We're never told. Both this film and New Hope follow the thread of secret plans hidden in a droid. In New Hope, the plans are the key to the survival of the heroes. In Force Awakens, the plans are ultimately irrelevant to the conflict at hand, which is one without access to the secret contained in those documents, i.e. Luke, who shows up for one wordless scene at the film's close.
Really? I turn and remove my hood, that's it?
Hell, why is Luke's reappearance even necessary at this point? Rey seems to be trekking along to become a Jedi without any teaching. Maybe it'll turn out that she's made such rapid progress because she's actually been using the dark side all along.
Is the dark side stronger?
But the busier, more seductive.
I have to admit, if they went that route, it would vastly redeem what they did with her character in Episode 7. The next installment's still a few months away as of this recording, but I'm not holding my breath. I pretty much expect a continuation of this rushed-through notion of development, where neophytes can best the experience, where sanitation workers can bring down superweapons, and where pilots and X-Wings can shoot individual stormtroopers on the ground, when Wedge pointed out previously that they couldn't even target a space 2 meters wide.
That's impossible, even for a computer.
Wait, are the computers in Star Wars so poor that they can't even hit a target 2 meters wide? That's actually kind of lame. Okay, maybe in the time since the end of Jedi, their computers are upgraded to the point that they can do things that computers in the real world have actually been able to do now for quite a long time. So fine, I take back that last objection. The rest still stand. Now, you may well like The Force Awakens, and that's fine. I liked Abrams' last film, Star Trek Into Darkness, which most fans seem to bitch about endlessly while praising this one. Though curiously, their overall ratings from critics and viewers are statistically just about the same. But you can like the film without pretending that there aren't legitimate reasons to take issue. Defenders are fond of claiming that critics both want an old-style Star Wars and for the film not to be too much like the original. Aside from the fact that these positions are not necessarily held by the same fans, it's ignoring the fact that the favorite film of the series, Empire, continued comfortably in the same universe as New Hope while having a plot that was completely dissimilar. Dismissing complaints about Rey's easy ride as sexism is a convenient dodge, much like with the recent Ghostbusters remake, where poor writing was ignored as a reason for its poor reception in favor of audience blaming, claiming they don't like female lead characters. I mean, it's not as if Wonder Woman was just a huge critical and commercial success, notably by a female director who wasn't waving an agenda. It's not as if the Hunger Games franchise made $1.5 billion with a female lead who had some skills but also a large support network of friends and allies. If Disney wants female sci-fi heroes, maybe they should look at some examples of some that were done well. Who doesn't love Sarah Connor, other than Fox? And a large part of that is due to the fact that her heroic status in T2 was well set up in the original Terminator, where she was a relatable, everyday person.
Come on, do I look like the mother of the future? I mean, am I tough? Organized? I can't even balance my checkbook.
And then there's Ellen Ripley, who makes a fantastic character trajectory in Aliens, beginning by being tormented with nightmares and refusing to go back, and gradually accepting more and more responsibility until she assumes a leadership role and faces down something that would make nearly anyone wet their pants with no visible fear at all.
Get away from her, you bitch!
This is a great movie moment because we can really feel just how much she's gone through to earn this. Overcoming adversity is something we all have to do, but when Rey faces off against Kylo Ren, well, of course she's going to win. The prospect of Luke facing Vader was a really big deal.
You must not go.
But here, that danger is sublimated to an agenda and makes the villain seem totally unthreatening. If she can beat him in Part 1, how can we fear for her in Parts 2 and 3? Mythologist Joseph Campbell, Lucas's guiding light when writing the story, referred to the bedrock of myth as the hero's journey for a reason. The hero has to make progress, not start awesome, stay awesome. That's Superman. And a large part of the reason why Superman tends to be kind of dull. The story fares no better than the characters, and logic gets tossed in favor of excuses to tug at those nostalgia strings again and again.
Is there a garbage chute? Trash compactor?
And again. If the rebels defeated the Empire, wouldn't that make the bad guys the Resistance? But no, the heroes are the Resistance simply because it sounds like the Rebellion. If Disney's second stab at a Star Wars film felt the need to retroactively insert a plot point explaining away the non-problem of how the rebels could destroy something like the Death Star when they had its design schematics, or you anticipate a future film where they explain how these new rebels were able to destroy an even larger base without recourse to the design schematics?
How do we blow it up? There's always a way to do that.
Did no one tell young Ben Solo that Vader had repudiated the dark side before he died? The one person who knew that firsthand was his teacher, Luke, who would have told his mother, Leia, if he'd told anybody. For that matter, why is he named Ben? Leia knew him as Obi-Wan. And Han Solo didn't even like Ben Kenobi.
Where did you dig up that old fossil?
In fact, the whole film was full of odd little what-the-fuck moments that seemed like the result of poor communication or editing. Abrams seems to have told Oscar Isaac to look astonished at something he sees inside the enemy ship. What is it? Who knows? The camera never even looks that way.
Maz is a bit of an acquired taste.
Harrison Ford also seems to have been told that Maz Kanata was going to look really weird.
Whatever you do, don't stare.
At what?
Any of it.
Any of what? She's an orange avocado wearing goggles, who for some reason has custody of Anakin's lightsaber.
Kept it locked away.
Locked my ass! The door lets Rey in with no argument. She opens the box with no key. Hell, the box clearly has no lock on it. Why are you lying, avocado woman? And is it me, or is there a missing scene here? Seconds after miraculously fixing the Falcon, Rey is dumbfounded by apparently nothing at all. Seriously, what is that expression? Look, I just brilliantly fixed your ship. Shit, did I remember to feed the cat? Perhaps Rey's insane. She has this exchange with Finn.
Come with me.
Don't go.
Literally 7 minutes after this scene.
I have to get home.
Jakku?
I've already been away too long.
Should I stay or should I go?
Where do you come from? Classified, really.
And why does Rey speak droid?
What did he say?
But it was your idea.
Why does Rey speak Wookiee?
I can't explain it.
As much as I love Star Wars, I don't feel that it needs to go on and on without end, which is clearly what its new caretakers intend for it.
This is madness.
There's flogging a dead horse, and then there's beating it into a paste. But who ultimately is really at fault here?
We read the ledger and it just don't stop. There's a trail of paper that leads all the way to the top.
I honestly question how much control the individual filmmakers even have in these scenarios, which is why I'm hesitant to blame J.J. Abrams for this mess. I don't take this personally, as have many detractors. It's a film I didn't like. It wasn't made to piss me off. I've liked JJ's previous films, and I might well like whatever he does next, as long as it isn't more Star Wars. Well, shit. Okay, I might well like whatever he does next. After. You know what I'm saying. On the far end of the spectrum from Force Awakens, Abrams co-wrote a novel called S, which is multiple stories in one, with back-and-forth conversations written in the margins of the book by characters who have supposedly checked it out from the library and left correspondence to one another over the book's ideas, its mysterious author, and how it relates to their own lives. This is a really interesting and creative endeavor, which makes me wonder how he could have ever been satisfied with the cut-and-paste approach to his Star Wars movie. Perhaps the blame lies higher up the ladder, and one way I suppose there is a candidate for the Mary Sue criticism: Disney itself, the living embodiment of getting whatever one wants just by wanting it, an entity for whom power and control have long since come easy.
All who gain power are afraid to lose it.
How much personal vision can survive under the aegis of a company worth $178 billion?
These are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
And you sold them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and...
Only now, at the end, do you understand?
Ironically, the then newly successful Lucas, who could scarcely afford to take risks when getting Lucasfilm off the ground, did just that by putting nearly all of his own money into The Empire Strikes Back. Disney, for whom risks are practically theoretical issues, would rather play it safe and preserve the status quo. No wonder they can't relate to a character who struggles for achievement. When was the last time they encountered a problem beyond the limits of their power?
I'll tell you the problem with the power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox.
Like I said, I've always loved Star Wars, and I expect I always will. Despite some stumbles along the way, and I think we know what some of those are, it's been a really fun ride. And instead of forging some exciting new trail to some new interesting territory, it's pandered to old fans by simply giving them what they already loved.
The shadow of greed, that is.
And it's pandering to new, younger viewers by being the equivalent of a participation trophy. The first trailer tried to assure audiences that everything would be just like old times, ending the promo with the meta dialogue of,
Chewie, we're home.
Sadly, all this film proved is that home burned down a long time ago.